Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to address this motion. And I must say that what's happened here in the House this afternoon is quite demonstrative of the problem that we're concerned about. I came to the House with the intention of supporting this motion. I would like to see some corridors. I'd like to see an opportunity for our energy industry to benefit from being able to sell their products internationally. But what I've heard from the other side of the House has made me decide to vote against it. And I think I need to spend some time talking a little bit about why that is, because not that often I come into the House and change my mind after listening to the government side of the House. But they've actually convinced me this time. And they convinced me that they clearly don't understand the point we're trying to make here. And the point we're trying to make is that we need to include everyone in order to create a national dream. We need to involve people so that they can be part of that national dream. I know the speaker from the MLA from Drayton Valley, Devon, commented about being able to tie us together, sea to sea, forgetting the third C, but I get the point. So I do think we need to be tied together, sea to sea to sea. But there's a problem if we do that without ensuring that we are truly allowing the participation of the rest of Canada, not just the builders. It reminds me of the fact that when another Conservative, Prime Minister MacDonald, worked so hard to get a railroad across the country, which was something, of course, we all think was a positive thing for the development that subsequently occurred. He then refused to allow Chinese laborers who built the railroad to be in the picture of the last spike. And that's not a part of our history that we should embrace. That's a part of our history we should be ashamed of. And what I'm concerned about now with this motion, which I wanted to support, because I certainly want to see a corridor. In fact, I attended meetings with Chief Rupert Menine, for example, from Tall Cree, to talk about a corridor between here and Hudson's Bay, to support him when I was Minister of Indigenous Relations. I had meetings about the railroads going to Alaska, which have been mentioned here, and I've been working with First Nations to support exactly the kinds of things. So I was hoping, here it is, we were going to have a moment where we could join together. But what we suddenly have is a situation where the consultation is not front and center in the motion. That the commitment to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People is being rejected. And I can't support that. Let me just bring in some of the words of some of the chiefs of this province around issues of development in the north. And the first one I'd like to share with the House is Chief Conroy Sawapagan from Little Red River Cree Nation. And he was at the time of this statement the Grand Chief of the North Peace Tribal Council. And he says, quote, "I remind Premier Kenney and all Albertans that as Dene, Beaver, and Cree peoples, we have occupied our territories since time immemorial and continue to do so today. We did not cede title to the lands when we entered Treaty Number 8, but agreed to share our territory in peace and friendship. Alberta should understand this by now and realize it has no authority to take up and sell our land in our territories without our free, prior, and informed consent." He goes on to say, "We are spiritual peoples. Our churches, our cathedrals, our places of worship are braided in these forests that surround us." End quote. I think the point here to be made is that Indigenous people have been on this land from time immemorial, and they are asking to be participants in the projects that help to benefit all Albertans. They're not rejecting them. They're not trying to get in the way of them. They are, in fact, sitting down with us and having conversations about how they can be participants in that. And we worked very hard to try to make sure that they were at the table. In fact, we were very successful in a number of ways. We, for example, helped worked with them to create the Indigenous Climate Leadership Program, which involved every one of the 48 First Nations and all 8 of the Métis settlements in moving ahead in terms of building solar and other kinds of environmentally designed projects. They participated because we invited them to sit at the table. We were also successful in our renewable energy program for the electrical grid, when we had First Nations from Treaties 6, 7, and 8 all win contracts to build wind facilities in this province in order to provide electricity to this province. They were there, they were successful, and their economies have built as a result of the work that we did in participation with them. And all we're wanting to see in looking at this amendment, what I was hoping to hear today, is that we were going to see significant Indigenous participation, and I'm afraid that the members opposite have convinced me that that's not really in the cards. And I can't support it if it's not really in the cards. I agree with the statements in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. For example, Article 26, which says, for example, in Section 1, quote, Indigenous peoples have the right to the lands, territories, and resources which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used or acquired. Section 2 says Indigenous people have the right to own, use, develop, and control the lands, territories, and resources that they possess by reason of traditional ownership or other traditional occupation or use, as well as those which they have otherwise acquired. Just examples of the things that we've committed to previously in this government but don't seem to be supported now. I'm not sure I understand why. Because an idea like a corridor could be very beneficial for this province. And we've seen in Canada, when you do something like that, and you don't actually ensure the full participation of the people who are going to be affected directly by it, then it leads to problems. And it's actually led to the point where we have international companies telling us that's the issue. The issue is we're not involving people who are going to be affected. Tech industry writes a letter, and 7 times in that letter, they say the problem is we don't have a climate leadership plan in the province of Alberta. They're not saying they're against building in Alberta. They're saying you just need to be able to do the complex work that will make this succeed. That you can, in fact, do 2 things at once. You have a left foot and a right foot. You can step forward in building the economy with 1 foot and step forward and build the environment with the other. You can actually build a national project like a utility corridor or a railroad or other incredible project if you actually sit down and say, we're only going to do this in full consultation with Indigenous people, and we're going to include the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People as our model of how we're going to proceed. If the government would commit to that and do that and hear the words of the chiefs about how they feel about things happening, particularly in Northern Alberta, without their consultation, then I'd be happy to stand up beside the government. It'd be my joy to go with the member who has proposed this to the bands in his community, like Alexis, where we've both been together at different events, and have a conversation with them about how we move forward. I would work with him to make that succeed. That's an offer. But I can't do it if I don't have the philosophical commitment that the government actually cares about the Indigenous people's point of view. Cares for it, I'm not trying to imply their intent. I mean, cares for it by actually taking action to ensure that they're involved, to guarantee in a single line in this motion could have changed things for me. A single line in the motion that said, we actually care about the environment, and so therefore, it's the therefore that matters. We are concerned about the Indigenous people's participation, so therefore, that's what I wanted to see. It's only a single line, and yet here we are, again, Conservatives suggesting a proposal
Honourable members, according to Standing Order 8.3, the Honourable Member for Lac-St. Anne Parkland has 5 minutes to close this out.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What we've seen here is a fantastic demonstration of yet another Trojan horse by the NDP. So what happens is they put a nice little motion across here, an addendum to my motion, of which they didn't consult. They had over a week to ask me any questions on it, of what the definition, consultation, the process, etc. Again, proving their own point. They don't consult. They didn't even have the professional courtesy to pass me in the hallway and ask what this was about. So immediately they imply that they're going to put an amendment forward so we can have, once again, divisive politics. The reason why I made a short answer here, Madam Speaker, was because I wanted to hear the debate. I had the hope of hopes when we put something, and I make my plea here to say that we've actually got something in the national interest, that we can unify our country, unify our province, unify our peoples, that we don't get divisive. It's implicit on the consultation process to include our First Nation partners, our brothers and our sisters. The call I get is on the phone with the chiefs. We talk about folks like this not dividing us. And this is what they take their time for in this House? They want to take that? And I'm being heckled by this fella. Member from Edmonton South is allowed to wave his arms and rant and rave, but I raise my voice. My goodness. The whole idea about this is to unify us. They're so flippin' short-sighted that they're going to trip over this. Again, my comment of tripping towards the finish line. They spent the last amount of time debating about this, that, and the other thing and dividing us. I'm talking about joining us. It's implicit. The AIOC is a way to get forward. We look at that in all the other territories. There was no way in my career I wouldn't have included consultation because I was the one doing it. I don't need your offer to come to the table and hold, what, a peace pipe? It's the most disingenuous thing I've ever seen. And Madam Speaker, when I was up talking to the First Nations, they couldn't understand why a construction manager, a project manager, or general manager was there. And it was this simple. When I'm sitting with the First Nations and I have my Indigenous consultation group, I'm there so they don't make promises I can't keep. And my word and my handshakes got us through areas that never would have happened before. And you know what? It's just like Treaty 6. It's a handshake. The symbolisms of Treaty 6 is two people shaking hands, keeping their commitments. And that's what this is. I want partners in prosperity. I want the divisiveness to end. When we start talking, we're talking about all Albertans, regardless of race, creed, or color. So what the members of the opposition haven't figured out is no matter how long or short your oar is or which color it is, you better be in the same boat as us, Madam Speaker, and pull in the same way. And that's exactly why our country is standing divided, because of this juvenile behavior. Professionals building projects across this country can't get through the systems because of this. Because of this. This is what I'm proposing. Let's get our act together. Let's pull together. Let's establish a corridor. Let's get full participation. Let's get our products to market, both in and out. Let's build this economy. You want a diverse economy? I want it too. We'll argue about the nuances of how to get there rather than agreeing to the goal. The folks in the States have shown us the way. Yes, I agree in concept. As I read from the A2A, they already have their border crossing. It's imminent. That's why they're turning things around. And that's why we can't get a blessed thing done. So again, you didn't ask. You didn't consult. You don't understand the process. And I do. And so do we. So thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I hope folks vote for this because this is how we build our country.